All right. So this is the, I'm going to give you guys some review. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a lab exercise just on random numbers so you guys get a little warmed up, and then we're going to do another lab on objects and arrays. So to review, remember what for loops are consisting of. There are 4 parts, which is to set a value initially, performing a test to see if that loop should continue doing whatever the loop says it should do, and then updating the values used in the loop. This was the example that I showed. So highlighting the for loop section of it. For loops, again, are very common for looping over a certain number of things. However, I would say the more common case is to loop over elements of an array. So oftentimes you have a list of things in a game. Very commonly you have a list of things in a game that are stored in an array. And I'm going to talk about arrays today. I'm going to talk about one type of arrays, but we're going to talk about more types of arrays later. Arrays are just collections of things, and arrays are so commonly used. Like, just thinking about Overwatch as an example, you have an array of heroes that you can pick from in Hero Select. You also have an array of all the players that are on your team that's stored in code that you can reference. You have an array of all the control points you need to take for a specific map. You have an array of all the maps that are available to play, or all the skins that you can pick from. All those things are arrays. And almost every case that you're looping over those things to do something, like for instance, I want to show all the skins that you can pick from in the UI. Well, I will write a for loop that starts at 0 and then counts up to all the skins that are in my array. So for loops, while in this case here it's looping 5 times specifically, we did a little bit of it where if you have a variable that stores how many times you want to loop, you can use that instead. And that variable sometimes is a number that you like type in. Sometimes, more often than not, it's just a variable that's like how many elements are in an array. Okay? That's why for loops are so common, is because you're often dealing with lists of all kinds of things. Even in the case of like a game like Asteroids, or a simple game like Tetris or Breakout, there are lists of objects of things in those games that you have to manage. I would say the one case where you probably don't use for loops that much in the game is probably a game like Pong. You can make without using arrays if you had to, or something like tic-tac-toe even to some extent. However, most often you do have to deal with arrays. So I want to talk about a specific example about game loops too, because that was another thing we discussed. If you guys remember, I brought up this thing, which was the generic kind of game loop and how a game works. You guys remember this all? Any questions about this? I want to take this principle though, and I want to apply it to an actual game that I want you guys to make. So this is a quick recap. Game loop runs as often as you can, depending on how much work you have to do within each part. It might take longer or shorter to finish that loop. You typically start by getting player input, or you receive that stuff over the network based on what other players are doing. You'll do whatever you need to do based on that input. You'll change the state of the game. Then you'll display that to the player. You'll actually render that to the screen. Depending on if you're game over or not, if you need to exit, you'll continue the loop or you'll exit the loop. So in this case here, we're going to make a game that is called Guess My Number. This is from the book. And the basic premise behind this game is that the computer is going to pick a random number between 1 to 100, and it's going to be the player's job to find out what that number is. If the player guesses correctly, then you congratulate the player, and yeah, you get an achievement, and you get get to brag to your friends. There's a leaderboard for this. You can implement a leaderboard later. It'll be really funny. But the idea is that you basically ask the player for a guess. If they're too high, the computer's going to tell them your guess is too high. If they're too low, you're going to tell them that it's too low, and then you're going to repeat. So the way the loop works is the first thing you do at the very top of that box is pick a random number. So you're going to have the computer pick a random number between 1 to 100. This is going to be the lab that you're about to do. The second thing is you're going to ask the player for a guess. The second thing is you're going to increase the number of tries that they've done so far. You're going to start off with 0 tries. After they guess, every time they guess, you're going to increase the number of tries. Then you're going to tell the player if they guessed too high or too low. Finally, if they actually guess the number, you're going to congratulate the player and tell them how many tries it took. If they didn't guess the number correctly, look where that no wire goes into. You're going to get the player's guess again. Okay? So this is actually already broken up into small pieces. So what I'm going to actually have you guys do is we're going to implement this. I'm going to have you guys all implement this on your own. What I want you to start with is each of these separate pieces by themselves and then worry about combining them together. Like, I would recommend not even doing the loop part. Don't even worry about looping this thing, repeating it to start. Just give them one guess the number right, and then tell them if they guess too high or too low. Like, that would be my first goal for this program. And before then, get a random number from 1 to 100 and just print that to the screen, like cheat, and just print it out to the screen, and then worry about each of these other things step by step. So basically, I have this lab that I'm going to put on Zool that describes the requirements. I'll put this up in SDVA103. So there's a lab number 1. And I'm going to keep this flowchart up there to help you. This is what the output should look like, by the way. Like, you enter a guess, it's too low. Enter a guess, it's too high. Once you actually guess it, it should tell you that. And I put a lab up here. So this is the lab. Computer picks a random number between number 1. Just do number 1 for now. And number 2, you guys can start if you finish number 1 early. Otherwise, just focus on number 1. And I'll give you guys about 45 minutes, maybe more if we need it. And I'll just leave this up here as well, the flowchart. And really just focus on one of these pieces at a time. Okay? Just pick a random number first and then do the rest of it sequentially. Okay? Treat this as your task list. If you guys forgot how to do the random numbers here, I'll put something up on Zool too if you need a starting point. I made a very simple kind of sample project. Where's my week 7? I'm going to put this up on Zool too. It's a Lab 1 CPP. If you want to just add that to your solution, it just looks like this, which is literally just seeding the random number and just having all the, what we call boilerplate, the simple startup stuff that you do all the time. So I just have this if you want to just use that from Zool, just to get you started. So if you go to Zool and grab the lab, you can also grab the Lab 1 CPP file in there, and it will have just this. I'm just trying to save you guys some time. Time. Yeah, if you want to, you can also open up the one on Zool because I did the whole seeding randomizer stuff. What happens when it crashes? Okay. So what does that mean to removing it? That's X. That's positive numbers. Breaks in there. Yeah. I'm missing a semicolon as well. Like that first line. That's good.
very carefully.
Oh, yeah, one thing I didn't put up there is I'll put the homework review that I did as well. And I'll put the one with the factorial recursive function in it. So if you want to know like random numbers or this will be, I'll just rename this one to be homework week 5. So I put both the CPP for this lab and homework week 5 up on Zool, so you can grab that.